are available to help you. And then spend most of the rest of our time talking about personal statements. So first, I would like to acknowledge the Chicanx Latinx Student Success Center for all their help throughout this entire academic year in putting on this Latinx STEM series. I couldn't have done it without the help of Lily Pinedo-Gangay and Elisa Aquino. Also, shout out to Sakanas at SJSU chapter. So please check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or email at the Gmail listed on the site to learn more. And thank you all for coming. So before we jump in, I'd like to go around and have some introductions. So if you could say your name and either your major and or your interests. And then just let us know if you've ever prepared a CV, resume, or personal statement before. So I guess I'll go first. I am Dr. Castillo-Bardaro. I am an assistant professor in the biology department. So I'm in the ecology and evolutionary biology area. And I'm from Southern California, and my interests are molecular ecology and wildlife biology. So first of all, what is the difference between a resume and a CV? So a resume is typically for a professional or industry job, whereas a CV is for academic or a research position. So the resume is going to be specific to the job you are applying for. So every time you apply for a job, you're going to fine tune your CV for that specific job, whereas a CV is did I say CV? I meant resume anyway. So your CV is going to be just a running list of your experiences and your accomplishments. So everything basically in your entire academic career is going to go into your CV, and it's just going to keep getting longer and longer and longer. So your resume should be 1 to 2 pages max. Whereas a CV has no official page limit, although sometimes you'll apply to something and they'll say, maximum 5 pages, or occasionally maximum 2 pages. Then you have to like really, really choose what to include in it. But I think mine is 7 pages long at this point. So your resume should really focus on the relevant experiences and skills for that position. Whereas your CV is focusing more on your accomplishments with a little bit of your skills if you want to add them in. So by accomplishments, I mean things like your degrees, your employment history, any sort of grants, scholarships, or fellowships that you have received, all of your publications or presentations that you've given. And then there are some other sections in there that you can include or not include. But these are the main ones that pretty much every CV is going to have. So which one should you make? Well, are you considering graduate school? If the answer is yes, then you should make a CV. If the answer is no, well, then you don't have to make a CV. Maybe you would rather make a resume, but I think it's a really good idea to make a CV and then use that as your starting point to build your resume. So this is going to be a running list of all of your activities, and then you can just copy and paste from your CV into your resume the things that are relevant for that particular job. And I guess I'll back up and say, stop me at any point if you have questions. I'll have a couple points in here where I'll stop and specifically ask for questions, but if you have any questions, just either raise your hand or speak up. All right, so this is my CV. It's a little bit out of date, but this is basically what my CV looks like. So it has my name and my...
Dr. Castillo, I'm not sure if you're projecting anything, but I'm not able to see what you're projecting.
Oh, that was a really important. Okay, let's try this again. There we go. How's that?
Perfect.
Awesome. So this is my CV. And everyone can see. All right, so I have my name and my contact info. If I were you, I wouldn't put your personal address and phone number. Instead, I would just put your email address. If you have a website or maybe a LinkedIn, you can include that on there. If you have a professional email, you can include that, but you want it to be an email that you check regularly and one that you have access to. So if you are going to be graduating soon, maybe don't include your SJSU email because it's going to go away. So everything in your CV should be in reverse chronological order. So put the newest first. Sorry, I'm trying to rearrange my screen here. There we go. So put your newest on the first thing that they see and then go backwards from there. The first section that I have on my CV is my academic positions, or you could put your professional experience here. So maybe you were an undergraduate researcher in someone's lab, you could put that as an academic position or a professional experience. And so you would say, professional experience, undergraduate researcher, and then Dr. Castillo-Verdaro's molecular ecology lab, San Jose State University, Department of Biological Sciences, and then the inclusive dates of when you had that position. And then after that, the next section I have is my education. So I include what the degree was, and then the institution, and in this case, my thesis title, my major professor, and again, the year that you graduated, or if you have not yet graduated, you are going to want to include the expected graduation date. So you could say anticipated May 2023. And this section can go first if you want to highlight your education above your professional experience. So it doesn't have to be in this particular order, but typically these are the two first things you'll see on a CV. I have also included professional development. This is not something that you see on every CV, but I think it's important and I want to highlight it. And so I primarily use my CV for promotion and tenure. So whether I get to keep my job, whether I get promoted from assistant to associate professor. So I think professional development is really important. And so I'm going to include it here. And then the next section I have are my grants, scholarships, fellowships, and awards. And I just kind of lump them all in there together. And I have sections. So in review, I have a grant. This is actually outdated, but the grants in review, grants that have been awarded. Then I also have a section here for not funded. So you don't often see that, but for my position here at San Jose State, it's important to show that I am applying for grants, whether or not I get those grants. So I've also included my not funded grants. But I also want to highlight here that no award is too small. So I have an award that I got that was $100 back almost 10 years ago, and it's still on my professional CV. And these don't need to be financial awards. So if you got some recognition for something that you have done that's related to your academic or your research, just throw that in there. And then publications is perhaps the most, not most important, but the most looked at part of your CV if you're an academic. And so here I have in preparation, in review, and published. The next section is presentations. So as an undergrad, you might have given a presentation at, say, the College of Science Research Day, which is coming up here in 2 weeks. So that is going to occur in the Duncan Hall courtyard. And so researchers are going from the various labs in the College of Science will have posters and students will stand next to them. And so it's a really casual, fun research experience, or well, I guess research presentation. It's not a formal scientific conference, but it still counts as you presenting your research. So basically any presentation that is not just for your class, I would include it. If you do a project, like a term project that you have to present to your class, and it's just for your class, probably don't include it. But if your class invites the community, invites other classes to come and say other professors come or other students that aren't in your class, then you might as well include that because that's open to the public. So you could put that on your CV as well. And then one of my last sections here is service. So I have to do service to the department, the university, the college, my discipline, and then also to the community. And so this is where you might put your participation in student organizations or any sort of community service outreach activities that you've done. So this is my CV. On the SJSU Career Center website, they have some examples of student CVs. And so this looks very similar to the one that I have. One thing you might notice is that there's actually more text in here that's giving details about each of these experiences. And so this is something that you can include. I have in the past, but I recently took that out of my CV because then it just gets really, really long. But this is a good thing that you could do, especially if you're planning on using your CV as a place to pull from for your resume. So for example, this is describing a research experience as part of a project, what your role was. You could just copy and paste that into your resume if that is relevant to that job that you're applying for. So the Career Center has a lot of really good resources, particularly for resumes. So if you go to the sjsu.edu/career center or just Google SJSU Career Center, it'll take you to this website. Lots of resources. They have this resume guide, which you can find either by following this, this path or going to Career Center, Students, Launch Your Career, and then click on Resume Cover Letter Guide. And this is a really, really good guide that lays out not only the structure of the resume, but also what types of words you might want to use and how to make it really strong. So for example, this will tell you how to make sure that you're tailoring your resume to the particular job that you're applying for. So what words in the job description should you focus on, and then craft your resume to make sure that you're addressing every single one of those key points to make yourself the most competitive candidate for the job. So you're trying to convince the person that's looking at your resume that may only take, 1 minute glance at your resume. You want it to stand out that you are the best candidate for this job. And then they have templates that tell you, the best organization for your resume. Some action verbs, so how to make it pop out, because you want it to be very direct and to the point and convey the most amount of information in the fewest words possible. And then really helpful, they have resume examples by majors. So at the end of this PDF document, there are a bunch of links and you can click on them. So there's one for biology. And this is what that looks like. So it's a one-page sample resume for biology. You can model yours after their example, and then you can get feedback on it. So I don't really know anything about this, this service, but you can upload your resume and get real-time feedback, make some edits, resubmit it again, and it's a really good way to improve your resume. Or you could take your resume in and actually talk to someone about it at the Career Center. All right. So I'm not going to talk much more about resumes because there's a lot of good resources at the Career Center, and you should definitely go check them out. But Are there any questions about the difference between a resume and a CV, and how you might improve yours?
I did want to share a lot of common conversations that I've had with students at Central, especially maybe our fourth-year students who are graduating, looking to apply to jobs or even internships or fellowships afterwards, who maybe haven't had a lot of work experience, or I think you were sharing a lot of your own just direct work experience, and I know a lot of our students might not always be or have a lot of direct experience. I know for a lot of alternative ways, you can always elaborate, or if you have any experience in student organizations, running clubs on campus, or working with clubs, or maybe you did an internship for a semester within your department or your major, or maybe perhaps you led a project in class and you led a presentation in class, and you can add that into your resume to show that you do have transferable skills. And so I think I really suggest that if you kind of find yourself in that place and maybe don't know what information to put on your resume, if you don't have a lot of direct work experience, that's a good way to, or good conversation also to continue having with Career Center folks, because there's a lot of other ways to fill up your resume with different experiences that we might not always think about relating to employee opportunities or just future positions. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for that. I was going to touch on that a little bit when we talk about personal statements, but I think it's really good to emphasize that again now. So in some of the examples that they give from the Career Center, they talk about there's like you did a senior project, for example, or you had to write like a research paper, if it's relevant to the job that you're applying for. Or another thing to think about is, maybe you had a job at Taco Bell that doesn't seem like it's relevant, but look for the relevant skills. So in that document from the Career Center, it also includes a section on transferable skills. So look through that and say, like, what skills did you gain through that experience working at something that seems like it's unrelated? Is it time management skills? Is it people management skills? Like, were you a manager at Taco Bell, for example? Try and find the way to connect that experience to the skills that you gained or the relevant experience that you gained. Because even if it doesn't seem relevant, it probably is in some way. Especially when it comes to like time management. So like if you had to work while also being a student, and that meant that you couldn't do, volunteer in a research lab, what did you gain from that experience aside from, a paycheck? You gained valuable time management skills. Talk about that in your resume or your personal statement, definitely. Yeah, thank you, Elisa. Anything else? All right, so I want to spend the rest of our time talking about personal statements, because this is something that, oftentimes you're asked to write a personal statement. You've never written one before. You don't know what it's supposed to look like. And sometimes you're given guidance and other times you're just told to write one. And so it can be really intimidating, especially like if you've never read one before. So we're just going to, talk a little bit about what it is in general, and then how to write a good one. It's my computer not moving. There we go. All right. So when would you encounter a personal statement? So if you apply to graduate school, you will definitely be asked to write either a personal statement or a statement of purpose, sometimes both. If you're applying for a summer research experience, oftentimes they'll ask you for a personal statement. Also, any fellowship opportunities or a fellowship application will ask you for one as well. And so this personal statement is really about you and your personal journey, as opposed to, a resume, which is supposed to be like a really quick, direct way to assess your experience. All right, so what is the difference between a personal statement and a statement of purpose? So a personal statement is kind of a broad statement about your past and your journey to where you are now and where you want to get to. Whereas the statement of purpose is more a concise statement about your future goals. So a personal statement will include information about your personal background and your life experience, how that has shaped you. Whereas the statement of purpose is more focused on your academic abilities and your achievements. So you should showcase your personality in your personal statement. So you want to make yourself stand out. So if you're applying for a fellowship or for graduate school, your application is going to get stuck into a stack with maybe hundreds or thousands of other applications. And this is your chance to make yourself stand out. So you want to make sure that you stay away from, well, you want to make it about you and why you are different, what you can bring to the program and what the program can do for you, rather than just a list of what you have done. So you should, this should be about, illuminating your personal challenges and goals, whereas the statement of purpose is more focused on those specific goals. You should explain your reasons for pursuing this program that you're applying for. So what has inspired you to go down this path, as opposed to explaining how this program will help you achieve those goals. I guess with the personal statement, you should do both. So more specifically, well, you should read the instructions very carefully if they're provided to you. Sometimes they'll tell you exactly what they're looking for in a personal statement. Otherwise, or other times they'll just say a 2-page personal statement. So if you don't get any instructions, you should write in 2 pages, probably not more or less, what are your career goals? What is it about your personal background that led you to those goals? What challenges have you faced in your journey to achieve your goals, and how have you overcome them? So this part is really important, and we'll spend some time on this. How will this program help you achieve your goals? And then why are you the ideal candidate for this program? So while this is a personal statement about your personal journey, the through line throughout this entire statement should be your career goals. So keep that as your thread throughout, and then you should be writing your narrative around that. So focus on your academic career goals, but tell a personal narrative. And importantly, you want to use specific examples. So what do I mean by that? So don't say generic things like, I love helping people, or I love nature, or I'm interested in, whatever. You want to be specific. You want to say how a specific experience in your life how that experience made you feel, or how that experience inspired you. So for example, something that I have written, as a kid growing up in suburban Southern California, my family piled into the car every spring break and headed to Yosemite National Park. Those early days spent hiking waterfalls and looking for bugs shaped the way I interact with the world around me and crystallized my desire to pursue conservation biology as a career. So this is a specific example that shines a light into my personal my personality and my upbringing, right? So like, what was that spark that sent me on this path? And so I'm telling the reader that I have a passion for conservation biology, but I'm also telling them in a personal way. So it's like show, not tell. You don't want to say, San Jose State is a great school, I want to go there. You want to say something like, I am interested in X program because of Y. So for example, I am interested in the Fisheries, Wildlife, and Conservation Sciences program at Oregon State University because of the focus on applied conservation and strong relationships with state and federal agencies. So make it clear to the reader that you are interested in their specific program and that you're not just sending out your application to 100 different programs to see which one accepts you. So maybe that is what you're doing. Maybe you're just broadcasting your application wherever you can, hoping that one sticks. But your best bet is to tailor your message to that particular place. So do your research and convince them of why you want to be there. Don't just list all of your experiences. Don't say, my freshman year, I did this, my sophomore year, I did this, and then I did this, and I learned how to pipette and blah, blah, blah. Like, sure, but everyone does that. What is it about those experiences that make you a better candidate? What did you learn through those experiences?
I could also add on to that because I know I've seen a lot of folks I've read a lot of personal statements, and sometimes I've seen where maybe in one personal statement, somebody tries to list or not list, but talk about multiple experiences at once. And maybe they're talking about 2 to 3 experiences, and it kind of takes away, the energy that could have been spent on one experience and really elaborate on that and really go in depth about talking about that. So I just wanted to also caution folks about like listing, or writing about too many experiences in one personal statement, where that kind of disrupts also the flow of, reading somebody's personal statement.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good point. So focus on the ones that you think tell the story that you're trying to tell. So again, throughout this whole thing, you should be focused on, this through line of where you want to get to, why you want to get there, how this program is going to help you get there, and how you can convey, how your personal history and experience has led you to this and makes you a better candidate. So just listing your experiences isn't going to do that as well as going more in depth into a few of them. So for example, I might say something like, as an undergraduate student researcher in the Castillo-Vardaro Molecular Ecology Lab, I not only learned practical skills like pipetting and PCR, I also learned the importance of organization, attention to detail, and perseverance in the face of failure. When a PCR failed, instead of getting discouraged, how did you overcome that challenge that you faced? And so in these couple sentences, you're telling them the practical skills that you gained, but you're also telling them more about the less tangible skills that you got from those experiences. So perseverance, maybe creativity, maybe you learned some more research skills into trying to figure out how to troubleshoot a PCR, all sorts of things that tell a better story than just saying, I pipetted a lot. All right, so any questions so far about the personal statement? All right, so this is the part that I think is the most challenging. This is talking about the challenges that you have faced in your journey to achieve your goals and how you have overcome them. So obviously, you can talk about challenges that you faced in the lab or in your classroom. Maybe you didn't do well on an exam and you had to do some reflection and some metacognition to figure out how to improve in the future. Great. You can talk about that. You can talk about, the technical skills and the challenges you face in the lab. Also great. But this is a personal statement. And so often, we're asked to talk about our personal challenges. And so this can be a difficult balance to strike. So we need to balance the reality of our experiences, especially as people that are underrepresented in STEM, with the feeling that we are putting our trauma on display, or the feeling that our trauma is being exploited. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time articulating this, but you're being asked to reveal a lot about your personal journey. And you want to be honest, and you want to, craft your narrative in a way that makes you look like a very strong candidate. And so you have to, balance this, so share as much as you're comfortable sharing within the narrative that you want to tell. So don't just put your trauma on display if it's not relevant, but it often is relevant in this context. And don't feel like you have to share anything that you don't want to share. So I'll give some examples and then we can have a discussion about this. So something that I have said in my personal statements, something along the lines of, having to pay my rent and living expenses in the exorbitantly expensive San Francisco Bay Area while a full-time student meant I needed a job and could not afford to volunteer in a research lab. I was fortunate enough to get a job as a curatorial assistant at the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology, tying tags on specimens and doing data entry. While these tasks were often menial in nature, I learned the ins and outs of museum collections, made connections with faculty and researchers, and eventually was hired as a summer field technician on the Grinnell Resurvey project. This led to other research opportunities, which shaped me as a scientist and inspired my interest in molecular ecology. So here I am conveying a challenge that I faced. So I faced financial challenges as an undergrad, but I'm spinning it in a way that is positive. Like, what did I do about this? I got a job, and how did that help me along my journey to achieve my goals? So, as we mentioned briefly before, maybe that job you got was, working in a Taco Bell or working as a manager. I was very fortunate that I got a job working in the museum that then led me to all these other amazing opportunities and set me on my journey to where I am today. But maybe you didn't have that great experience. How can you talk about those experiences that you had? So this is where you could talk about, having to pay for your rent and, all of this other stuff on top of being a full-time student, what those challenges were like. Maybe you had a full-time job, working on campus in a non-research or non-academic position, but that taught you really important things like time management or leadership, and how have those experiences better prepared you to undertake graduate school or to reach for your professional goals. Another thing that I have said on my personal statements is, as a Latina in STEM, I have never been in a classroom with an instructor who looked like me. As a result, I often questioned whether I belonged in this field. So that is a deeply personal thing to say, but then you want to say what you did about that. It looks like I lost a slide here. So this is something that I very often put in my personal statements, or I just wrote a grant to the National Science Foundation that I submitted in January. And I wrote this in there and I said, as a Latina, I've never been in a classroom with an instructor that looked like me. And now as an assistant professor, I am that person that I did not have as an undergrad. So I take my role very seriously. And as a result, I am doing X, Y, Z in that capacity. So what is that experience that you had? And what are you doing about that experience? So how has that experience shaped you? And what are you doing in response? So for example, I often questioned whether I belonged in this field. So I sought community at the Chicanx Latinx Student Success Center at SJSU, and I participated in such and such activities. Whether or not they're relevant to the particular job, you can talk about what that meant to you. Here's an example from a former student. She said, as a first-generation Latina student, my biggest fear in chasing a degree would be to let my family down after all they had worked to provide me with a good education. When I enrolled in community college, my mother was unemployed, my father was incarcerated, and I was working 3 jobs to put myself through school. From a statistical point of view, I was destined to fail. So this is how she started her personal statement. This is an extremely powerful opening to your personal statement. And this was a successful application. And so, I share this because, we're put in this position where we have to decide how much we're comfortable sharing and what it means that we're being judged based on these types of experiences. And so we can have, a conversation about that, what that feels like, whether that's right. But the reality is, this is often what we're asked to do. But you should remember, in your statement, you're tying it back to this common thread. What are your career goals? What is it about your personal background that led you to those goals? What challenges have you faced and how have you overcome them? So focus, on the second part. How have you overcome them, or how have you dealt with those situations? What have you learned from that? And what has that taught you? So that is the important part. And then moving forward, how will this specific program help you achieve your goals? And why are you specifically the ideal candidate for this program? So I'm interested to hear your thoughts about this. If you've been asked to write a statement like this, or so like what comes to mind when you see a prompt like this?
For me personally, I think it's always been a struggle to talk about things that were personal to me. And the older I got, the more I realized this isn't what schools expected from you, but it was, I guess, better in a sense if you were more comfortable with sharing that kind of stuff on paper. So when you brought that up, I definitely could reminisce with that.
Yeah. And, sometimes I feel like we're competing for who has the I don't want to say like the trauma Olympics, but, sometimes it can feel that way and it can be really, really challenging. And so like, if you're trying to write your personal statement and, you're wrestling with, how much of yourself do you want to to share. You know, if you're writing this for an employer or for a you know, someone that's going to be your mentor, do you really want to you know, make all these really to expose, you know, your personal history, or do you want to hold some of that back? You know, if you're applying for a fellowship that, you know, some random person and that anonymously is going to read your application, maybe you'll share a little bit more. So yeah, this is something that I've definitely struggled with a lot. You know, where is that balance? And I think probably the best thing that you could do is, you know, talk to your mentors. You can come talk to me about it, and we can, you know, talk about the audience. Who's the audience? Who's going to be reading it? What is the most effective way to tell the story that you're trying to tell? All right, and then lastly, like, why are you the ideal candidate for this program? And I highlight this because you should be explicit. You should tell them straight up, I am an ideal candidate for this position because I have extensive experience in X. I have demonstrated persistence through Y, and this program will bring me closer to achieving my goals of this, right? So your final statement of your last couple sentences should be telling them, this is why you should give me this position. And it can feel really awkward. At least, you know, me, I was raised like not to toot my own horn too much, you know, not to say that I'm the best, because that's, you know, it's inappropriate to be like, oh, I'm better than you, I'm the best, so you should hire me, right? But that's what you have to do. You have to tell them, I am the best candidate for this job because. And really importantly, you know, get feedback from your mentors and from your advisors. So this is very personal, and I've read a lot of personal statements, and as a mentor, I struggle sometimes with how to give advice to someone writing their personal statement, because, you know, when they're writing like a scientific paper, I can take my red pen and like cross it out and be like, you need to change this and rearrange this. Whereas a personal statement, you know, it's very personal. But I highly advise you to get feedback from your mentors, from your advisors. I'm happy to help with any of this. And we can have these conversations about, you know, what is the most effective story to tell to make you the best candidate for this job or for this position. So that's really all that I have, and I would really like to answer any of your questions about any of this. So with our last few minutes, since we got started a little bit late, you know, have you run into any of these questions, or yeah, just how can I help you on your journey to finding jobs and applying for graduate school?
I just wanted to like talk about how you talked about like trying to elaborate more on like your experiences and all that, and like just not just listing the stuff you've done. So I feel like that was really helpful, and I find like I kind of get stuck with like not explaining like writing, you know, trying to elaborate more. So yeah, I just found that really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And so, you know, maybe you work in a lab and you're, you know, just pipetting all day, but like, what did that teach you? That taught you probably attention to detail, how to follow a protocol, how to keep a lab notebook, right? So think about all the things that are not as obvious and highlight that, because like anyone can pipette. But what did you learn from that experience? How does that make you a better candidate? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I guess, you know, the main takeaway from all of this is that your application is going to go into a stack of hundreds of other applications, and you need to make yours rise to the top. And so you need to, you know, look at those Career Center resources that have like action words. Don't just say, I did this. Look at those different words and make every statement stand out and be like to the point why you're qualified for this position. Well, thank you everyone for joining us and for being patient and sitting through the fire alarm. I should have put my email address up there. I'll put it in the chat. Oh, we have a question. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask for your email because I was wondering if I could get some feedback on my resume and cover letter for internships I'm planning for the fall.
Yes, definitely. You can email me, and in the email, just let me know that you attended this workshop, and I will definitely take a look. You can also go to the Career Center and